The city didn't just sleep. It held its breath under a blanket of bruised purple clouds, the last of the evening's rain dripping like tears from the fire escapes of Park Avenue. Alara was a ghost in this world of gleaming stone and glass, a smudge of gray against the vibrant life of the wealthy. Her world had shrunk to the space between the dumpster and the service entrance of La Celeste, a restaurant so exclusive its name was whispered, not spoken. The aromatic ghost of truffle and brown butter that sometimes escaped when the door swung open was both a torture and a lifeline. Inside, Alexander Vance was drowning in a different way. Seated at the best table, a half-empty bottle of Chateau Margaux 1982 before him, he was the picture of success. His suit was worth more than most people's monthly rent, his watch a tiny engine of precision on his wrist. But his eyes, a stormy sea gray, were hollow. The financial report on his tablet glowed with triumphant numbers, but they were just hieroglyphics on a screen. He was 39, a king of his own empire, and he had never felt more desolate. The silence in his penthouse was deafening, the echo of his own footsteps a mockery. This dinner, like all the others, was a performance. A celebration of a victory that felt like ash in his mouth. He pushed the plate away. The duck confit, a masterpiece of crisp skin and succulent flesh, was barely touched. The delicate porcelain, the artistic smear of cherry reduction, it all felt obscene. He signaled for the check, his movements sharp with a frustration he couldn't name. Alara saw him through the window, a dark prince in a lit castle. She saw the dismissal of the plate. Her stomach clenched, not just with hunger, but with a familiar, weary shame. This was the worst part, the asking. But the gnawing in her belly was a more insistent master than her pride. She watched him rise, toss a few crisp bills onto the table, and stride out, not towards the bustling valet, but down the street, towards his private garage. This was her chance. She moved from the shadows, her worn sneakers making no sound on the wet pavement. He was taller up close, his broad shoulders blocking the light from a street lamp. He smelled of sandalwood and fine wine, a scent that belonged to another universe. Her voice, when it came, was a threadbare whisper, snatched away by the wind. "Sir." Alexander kept walking, lost in the cacophony of his own thoughts. She tried again, a little louder, desperation lending her strength. "Sir, please." He stopped, turning with an impatient sigh. He was used to being approached. Reporters, sycophants, aspiring entrepreneurs. He expected a pitch, a plea for investment. His eyes, cold and dismissive, swept over her. The frayed jacket, the jeans faded from too many washes, the face pale with hunger. A beggar. His wallet was already in his hand. A few $100s to make her, and the problem she represented, disappear. And then she spoke the words that would fracture his world. "May I?" She swallowed, her throat dry. "May I have your leftovers, sir?" The question hung in the damp air, so profoundly degrading, so starkly honest, that it cut through the fog of his self-pity like a scalpel. It wasn't a request for money. It was a request for the food he had so carelessly discarded. The uneaten duck confit, the bread basket, the scraps. His hand, holding the money, froze. His eyes, which had been scanning her as a social problem, were suddenly captured by hers. And a miracle happened. He looked into her eyes. They weren't the eyes of a defeated addict or a broken soul. They were the color of ancient forest moss, deep and impossibly clear. And within their depths, he didn't see despair. He saw a quiet, unyielding resilience. He saw a dignity that her circumstances had not been able to erase. He saw a flicker of the same profound loneliness that haunted his own mirrored halls. In that single, breathtaking moment, she wasn't a beggar. She was a person, a beautiful, hauntingly sad person, and her gaze held a truth his life had been missing for a decade. The money in his hand felt filthy, an insult. The air left his lungs in a soft rush. The impatient words died on his lips. The city sounds, the distant honk of a taxi, the drip of water, faded into a dull hum. All that existed was the silent plea in her moss-green eyes and the shocking humility of her request. "Your leftovers," he finally managed, his voice rough, unfamiliar to his own ears. Alara flinched, bracing for the derision, the security guard being called. "Yes, sir. If you don't want them. It's a waste otherwise." She hugged her arms around herself, a futile gesture against the chill and the shame. Alexander looked down at his own hands, at the platinum ring on his finger, a symbol of a life that suddenly felt grotesquely excessive. He looked back at her, truly seeing the delicate line of her jaw, the faint freckles dusting her nose, the way a strand of dark hair clung to her damp cheek. "No," he said, the word firm, decisive. Her face fell, the last vestige of hope extinguished. She took a half step back, ready to flee back into the anonymity of the shadows. "No," he repeated, softer this time. "You will not have my leftovers." He took a step closer, his gaze intense, pinning her to the spot. "You will come inside. You will sit at a table. And you will order anything you want from the menu. My treat." Alara stared at him, certain she had misheard. This was a trick, a cruel joke. Millionaires didn't do this. The world didn't work this way. I can't. I'm not dressed. Please," he said, and the word was so foreign on his tongue, so utterly sincere, that it broke her last defense. It wasn't a command from a man used to being obeyed. It was a request from one lonely soul to another. "My name is Alexander. Let me do this. Just let me buy you a proper meal." Tears, hot and sudden, welled in her eyes. She had cried from hunger, from cold, from fear. But she hadn't cried from kindness in a very, very long time. A single tear traced a path through the city grime on her cheek. She looked at the restaurant, a fortress of light and warmth, then back at this impossible man whose stormy eyes held not pity, but a shared, unspoken understanding. The maitre d' at La Céleste had seen everything. He had seen celebrities, politicians, and titans of industry. But he had never seen Alexander Vance, one of their most revered patrons, walk in with a woman who looked like she had been sleeping in doorways. His professional mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing pure, unadulterated shock. But a single, sharp look from Alexander, the look that made junior executives weep, had the man snapping back to attention. "A private booth, Jean-Pierre. And 2 menus, Alexander said, his voice leaving no room for question. They were led to a secluded corner, shrouded in velvet and shadow. Alara moved as if in a dream, her body stiff, hyper-aware of her dirty clothes against the plush upholstery. The opulence of the room was overwhelming. The soft glow of crystal sconces, the weight of the silverware, the starched white linen. It felt like a different planet. A waiter appeared, his expression impeccably neutral. Alexander ordered for her, his voice gentle. "The truffle risotto to start. And the sea bass. And a glass of the sauternes, please. Something sweet." When the waiter left, an awkward silence descended. Alara kept her eyes fixed on the tablecloth, her fingers tracing the intricate embroidery. "Alara," Alexander said, testing the name she had given him outside. It sounded like a poem on his lips. "That's a beautiful name. It was my grandmother's," she whispered, finally looking up. The direct eye contact was still a shock, a current that passed between them. "Thank you for this. I don't understand why you're doing this." "Neither do I," he admitted, a faint, bewildered smile touching his lips. It transformed his face, erasing years of stern lines. "I saw you, and I couldn't walk away." The food arrived. Alara ate slowly at first, then with a ravenous intensity she couldn't conceal. Each bite was a revelation. She closed her eyes, savoring the creamy risotto, the flakes of the perfectly cooked fish. It wasn't just food, it was a memory of a life where such things were normal. Alexander didn't touch his food. He watched her, captivated. He saw the way her eyes closed in simple pleasure, the way her slender hands cradled the wine glass. He found himself telling her things he hadn't told anyone. The crushing weight of his father's legacy, the loneliness of his success, the hollow victory of every new acquisition. "It's like I've been building a palace, room by room," he murmured, swirling the golden sauternes in his glass. "And I've only just walked inside to find it completely empty." Alara listened, her intelligent eyes absorbing his every word. "An empty palace is still a palace," she said softly. "It has a roof. It has walls. It's safer than an open street." Her perspective, born of a reality he could barely comprehend, was a bucket of cold water. It was humbling. "And you?" he asked. "What's your story, Alara?" Her story tumbled out in fragments, a tapestry of misfortune woven with threads of bad luck and worse timing. A degree in art history, student debt, a layoff, an eviction. A car accident that had wiped out her savings and left her with no family to turn to. It was a slow, cascading failure, the kind that could happen to anyone, a lesson Alexander was only now beginning to learn. It's not a very exciting tragedy, she finished, a sad smile on her lips. Just a series of small, quiet collapses. It's the most real thing I've heard in years, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Hours slipped by. The restaurant staff began the subtle ritual of closing, polishing glasses and dimming lights, but they left the island of Alexander's booth untouched. He paid the bill with a black card, ignoring the astronomical total. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city was clean and quiet. He turned to her on the sidewalk, the space between them charged with an unspoken, impossible future. "Let me help you," he pleaded. "Not just a meal. Let me get you a room. A job. A fresh start." Alara looked at him, her heart a wild, conflicted thing in her chest. This was a fairy tale. And she knew how fairy tales ended for girls like her. They woke up. "Alexander," she said, her voice trembling. "This was a miracle. A beautiful, kind miracle. But I can't step into your world as a charity case. The debt would be too great." She reached out, her hand hesitating before she gently placed it on his arm. It was the first time she had willingly touched him. "Thank you for seeing me. Not many people do." She stood on her toes and pressed a soft, fleeting kiss to his cheek. It was a kiss of gratitude, of goodbye, filled with the scent of rain and sauternes. Then, she turned and walked away, melting back into the labyrinth of the city. Alexander stood rooted to the spot, his cheek burning where her lips had been. The hollow feeling was gone, replaced by a fierce, protective ache. He wouldn't let her disappear. He would find her. He would. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Irritated, he pulled it out. It was an alert from his private security detail. He absently opened it, his eyes still searching the darkness where she had vanished. And then his blood ran cold. The message contained a single, grainy, black and white photograph, taken by a discreet street camera earlier that evening. It was a clear shot of Alara's face as she had first approached him. The subject line read, "Perpetrator identified." His heart hammered against his ribs. With a shaking finger, he opened the attached dossier. It was all there. Her name wasn't Alara, it was Liana Vance, and the photograph beneath the name was a younger, happier version of the woman he had just shared a meal with. His wife. The wife who had supposedly died in a car accident 10 years ago. The dossier scrolled, a cold, clinical narrative of a different kind of tragedy. A misidentified body, a profound trauma-induced amnesia. A woman who had vanished from the hospital, her memory a blank slate, her old life erased. She had been living on the streets, a ghost, while he had built his empire on the foundation of her memory. He looked up from the blinding light of the screen, staring into the impenetrable darkness where she had gone. The leftovers she had asked for weren't the food on his plate. They were the leftover pieces of a life, of a love, he had thought was buried forever. And she, his Liana, had been living in the ruins of it, not even knowing what she had lost. He had looked into her eyes and seen a miracle. But the miracle wasn't his kindness to a stranger. The miracle was that she was alive. And the heartbreaking drama was only just beginning.